Welcome to another Keymaster episode. I'm Sven Rajala. Today I've got my adopted son Joey here, and Joey wanted to talk about Key Archive today. He felt that's a topic that we could learn more about. So Joey, let's go over some questions you had about this.
Yeah, thanks, Sven. Yeah, Key Archival is just one of those things, coming from Microsoft background that I really only see in auto-enrollment use cases for stuff like MIME or EFS. And obviously there's a bunch of different PKIs out there. There's a bunch of different ways that those different PKIs implement Key Archival. And figured maybe we could start with what is Key Archival and what are some of the use cases you've seen out there for it?
So Key Archival is where you would have your encryption keys escrowed by the CA, meaning they're protected like in a database, encrypted so it's not clear text, and protected. That way, after it's issued, in the event that key or certificate, well, mostly the key is damaged at that point, that you have a way to recover the key and be able to decrypt data that was encrypted with it. Otherwise, there's nothing you can do, right? Key's damaged, there's no way you're decrypting that data.
Right. And in that case, there's a lot of best practice, I'm sure, around how you guys store how, as you alluded to, how you store the encryption keys, who has access to the encryption keys. And I figured maybe us talking through maybe what some of those best practices you've seen or just what's out in the field is with respect to how people are using those keys. And
so it's going to be, kind of use case dependent and how the CA is operated.
Yeah.
There's a term you might have heard of, KRPS, for a key recovery practice statement.
Yeah.
CAs that are operating under a higher assurance would definitely have that. And you're going to have a very fine-grained practice about how a key recovery happens. 4i principle is usually a pretty great thing to have for those.
Yeah.
4 or more eyes, 4, 6, there's usually a process, at least a minimum of 2 admins that would go through and do the recovery. There could be a manager on top of them that would sign off before the recovery could happen. I've seen software that can actually do that, but I've also seen it be very manual where, a manager just signs the form and they have a whole chain of custody to recover onto a thumb drive, and then it goes into a tamper-evident bag and locked in a safe, and then there's a whole paper trail every time that key was accessed since it was recovered.
Right.
I mean, again, it just depends on the policy and how that goes. To kind of go back to your use case side, I mean, it's really, like you said, SMIME or data encryption, EFS, and it's really encryption use cases of where it's important, where you'd practice Key Archive to be able to recover that key.
Yeah, pretty much anywhere you just can't lose that data.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and in that case, it sounds like, obviously having something like a KPS or KRPS would make it so the CA admin just can't recover any key they want and basically pretend to be whoever or decrypt whatever.
And that's also why we have roles in PKI, right? A big part is having role-based access controls in the CA. So that type of stuff doesn't happen because the admins have their set permissions. And you could have like an alternate person who's not even an admin that just handles the key recovery part that could go in and even do that.
Yeah.
So it's all about having good defined roles. Yeah, audit trails is critical.
Yeah.
That's always a good thing for a PKI, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and those certificates, because the key that you use to encrypt the request coming in, those have a lifetime as well, right? So
well, yeah, I'd hope so.
Yeah, right. So the process, I mean, out in the field, have you seen, when you're rotating those certificates and trying to make sure, for example, you have a key recovery, something Microsoft calls a key recovery agent certificate that expires tomorrow, let's say, but you're about to issue a certificate that is good for a year, and it will encrypt that certificate for that year. So you need to, I've seen out personally where people need to be careful about cleaning up their CAs because they can't get rid of that key material that encrypted the certificate that's longer than the day before it's about to expire. Is that something, obviously Microsoft has their way of dealing with key recovery. Is that something in other PKIs you've seen where?
Not the other ones I've worked with. The other ones I've worked with, it's been handled by the CA and not using that KRA concept like Microsoft does.
Yeah, interesting. So basically the lifetime of the key, that key is the lifetime of the CA. So there's no rotation of, you don't have to worry about a lifetime.
I mean, it depends on what the solution does. Most likely I would say you'd probably just use a key on the HSM to use instead that's not tied to a certificate that way.
Yeah, so you can renew if you need to and stuff like that.
Yeah, you could. Well, that would be a whole new issue. You'd have to probably decrypt all the escrowed certs and re-encrypt if you wanted to change the key.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a bit of most likely an outage on the CA to do that.
Yep.
It has been done. People will do that. It's not something I've seen a lot of. And the 17 plus years, I've only seen that twice.
Yeah.
It's not something common.
Right. So you just kind of set it up and leave it secure and try not to rotate it if you don't need to.
Which actually brings up the good point with like post-quantum coming around, that would probably see a lot of that because people want to re-encrypt with
the new
quantum
kinds.
safe algorithms now.
Yeah.
So that's actually a really interesting point, Joey. Something we should
dive into that a little bit.
Yeah. How's that going to work?
Yeah. Kind of getting your...
How many hours will you have to be down for migration depending on database size?
Right. And then your clients will also have to be able to sit there and decrypt. Like your CA has to obviously be able to use the new algorithms for PQC to handle that. And then giving that message back to the client that might be requesting it. It needs to be able to decrypt it too.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be some game changers with some of this.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, Sven, I think, that answers my questions about key recovery and archival.
Well, great. Then we'll wrap it up. Joey, thanks for attending our Keymaster episode on Key Archive, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Yep. Thank you.